The stars over Colony Epsilon were peaceful. Tiny lights blinked in the darkness. Families slept inside their small homes. Children dreamed about new adventures. It was a quiet, happy night. Then, without warning, the sky tore open. Bright lights flashed above the colony. Giant ships appeared, cold, dark, and sharp like knives. The Haelor Empire had come. They did not send a message. They did not give a warning. They simply attacked. The first explosions hit the colony's edge. Dust and fire rose into the night. Alarms screamed across the buildings. People woke up in terror. Parents grabbed their children and ran for shelter. Soldiers raced to their stations, but their weapons were small compared to the Haelor warships. Commander Elinga Reyes watched from the main control tower. Her hands were steady, but her heart was heavy. She knew this day might come. She had warned Earth Command months ago. "The Haelor are moving too close to us," she had said. But the warning had come too late. Elena opened a secret channel and spoke calmly. "Send the signal. Activate Omega." A small team in the tower sent a silent signal deep into space. No one in the colony could see it. No one on the Haelor ships noticed. But somewhere, far away, something ancient and powerful had just been awakened. Outside, Haelor dropships landed near the colony. Strange, tall creatures in black armor marched out. They looked at the weak human defenses and smiled cruelly. One of their captains, a Haelor named Velrek, laughed inside his helmet. "Humans are softer than we thought," he said to his squad. "Take prisoners if you like. Leave none standing." They moved quickly, kicking down doors, pulling people from their homes. The humans fought back where they could, but it was hopeless. Haelor energy rifles burned through walls and metal like paper. Still, something felt wrong to Velrek. He expected panic. He expected begging. Instead, many humans stared back with strange calm in their eyes. Some even smiled faintly before being captured. "Strange creatures," Velrek muttered. Meanwhile, up in orbit, the Haelor fleet commander, Admiral Voris, watched the invasion unfold on his screens. Everything looked perfect. He sat back in his chair and gave the order. "Prepare to burn the colony after capture. We make an example of them." He had no idea that a single small signal had already left the planet, flying faster than light across the galaxy. In the colony's underground shelter, Commander Reyes looked at her team. "Hold the lines as long as you can," she said. "Help every civilian you find. We only need time." Her officers nodded. They understood. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to survive. Until help arrived. Above, Haelor bombers circled the colony, ready to drop final strikes. But just before they moved in, strange interference crackled through their systems. Communications failed for a moment. Shields flickered. Engines stuttered. Admiral Voris frowned. "What is this? Some human trick?" His technicians shook their heads. "Unknown, Admiral. It's not coming from the colony. It's coming from somewhere else." Far away in deep space, engines roared to life. Silent giants that had slept for decades now moved with deadly purpose. Humanity's hidden weapons, the kind never shown to the galaxy, had heard the call. And they were coming. Back at Colony Epsilon, Velrek and his troops pushed into the main control building. They smashed doors open, expecting frightened humans to be hiding inside. Instead, they found empty halls and dark screens. A single message was left blinking on a broken monitor. "You are not ready." Velrek growled in anger. He turned to shout an order, but outside, the sky had changed. Tiny points of light now moved against the stars. They were too fast to be Haelor ships. They were too many. "Admiral," Velrek shouted into his comms, "there's something coming. It's—" The signal cut off. Up above, Admiral Voris' fleet finally saw it. Shadows in the darkness. Ships they could not recognize. Shapes that moved like predators through deep water. "Raise shields. All ships prepare for combat." Voris barked. His officers scrambled. But their systems were slow. Their shields flickered weakly. Something invisible was already inside their defenses. Back on the ground, Commander Reyes stood at the highest point of the colony. She looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "They heard us." The first human warship broke through the blackness like a ghost. It made no sound, no warning, just pure, silent fury. The Haelor Empire had started this battle with pride, laughing at the weak humans. Now, for the first time, fear entered their cold alien hearts. They had no idea what nightmare they had awakened, and it was just the beginning. Admiral Voorhees stood in the command center of his flagship, the Bloodborne. His eyes narrowed as strange signals flickered across the screens. The humans' colony was almost fully captured, but now something felt wrong. Multiple unknown contacts detected, his sensor officer said nervously. "Their speed, it's impossible, Admiral. We can't lock onto them." Voorhees slammed his fist on the armrest. "It's a trick. Human technology is primitive. Focus on securing the colony. Ignore these ghost signals." The officers obeyed, but unease filled the air. Everyone could feel it, like a storm they couldn't see, but knew was coming. Down on the surface, Velric and his squad rounded up the last human survivors. Families sat quietly under guard. No one cried. No one begged. They sat calmly, even smiling at times. Velric frowned. This was not normal behavior for a defeated species. "Where is your fear?" He barked at a human soldier. The soldier just smiled wider and said, "You're already too late." Velric felt a chill, something he hadn't felt in years. He turned away and ordered his soldiers to move faster. Above them, in the cold space between stars, the unknown contacts came closer. Silent, fast, and invisible to normal sensors. They didn't send warnings. They didn't announce their arrival. They simply hunted. Meanwhile, on the Haelor communications network, strange glitches appeared. Screens blinked. Messages twisted into unreadable symbols. Even the Empire's strongest encryption couldn't stop it. Technicians struggled to fix it, but nothing worked. Suddenly, a signal broke through, loud and clear, across every Haelor ship. You should have listened. The voice was cold, human, and terrifying. Admiral Voorhees jumped from his seat. "Find the source. Now," he roared. But no one could. The signal came from everywhere and nowhere. In the outer patrol zone, a Haelor scout ship, the Bright Sword, was on routine search when the crew spotted something strange. Unidentified object at 600,000 kilometers, the pilot reported. Size, massive. Speed, uncertain. "It's not in our records." Before the captain could respond, the lights inside the Bright Sword flickered. Power drained away. Engines died. Weapons failed. The ship floated dead in space. Outside the window, the crew saw a shadow pass by. It was not just big, it was monstrous. A massive black warship, shaped like a hunting beast, slid silently past them. The crew tried to scream, to send a message, but nothing worked. Within seconds, the Bright Sword was gone. No explosion, no debris, just silence. One moment there, the next, nothing. Back in the main fleet, Admiral Voorhees finally received a broken, panicked message. "Unknown ship, can't escape, too fast." Then silence. The Admiral's skin turned cold. "Prepare the fleet for battle," he shouted. "Full alert. All fighters launch. Activate all defenses." Thousands of Haelor ships moved into position. Weapons charged. Shields powered up. Fighter squadrons filled the space around the fleet like a metal swarm. Still, the darkness stayed silent. No enemy ships appeared. Yet, one by one, the outer defense patrols went dark. First one, then another, then 5 at once. Gone. No signals, no battles, no debris, just pure, chilling disappearance. On the colony surface, Velric received new orders. Leave the colony immediately. Return to orbit. Emergency extraction. Velrek scowled. He didn't like leaving without burning the human buildings. It was Haelor tradition to destroy defeated colonies, but the tone of the order made him pause. It wasn't a request. It was fear. Velrek turned to his squad. Move the prisoners. Now. As they moved, a human child slipped from the group. She was maybe 7 years old, small and barefoot. She ran up to Velrek and handed him a simple object, a small carved stone shaped like earth. Velrek sneered. "What is this, human child? A gift before your end." The child looked up at him and said in a soft, clear voice, "No, it's a reminder. You woke the old ones." Before Velrek could react, a low rumble shook the ground. The soldiers looked up. In the sky, tiny lights blinked and shifted. Not stars, not human colony ships. Something else. Something terrible. On the flagship Bloodborne, alarms screamed. Unknown fleet inbound. Massive energy readings. We can't calculate their numbers. Admiral Voris stared at the screen. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of unknown ships were coming out of dark space, surrounding his fleet from all sides. He opened a broadcast to all Haelor ships. "Hold your ground. Fight with honor." Inside, he felt fear clawing at his heart. They had thought humans were weak. They had thought humans would break. They were wrong. They were horribly wrong. And now it was too late to stop what was coming. Admiral Voris stood at the command console, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The view on the massive screen in front of him was a nightmare unfolding. The unknown fleet was enormous, surrounding the Haelor ships on all sides. There were no signals, no messages, just the cold, terrifying silence of space. "Admiral," his communications officer said, his voice trembling. "They're not responding. None of our hails are getting through. It's like they're not even there." Voris clenched his jaw. The fleet was trapped. There was no way out. The Haelor Empire had fought wars across galaxies, but this was something different. These ships, silent, ghostly, did not behave like anything they had ever encountered. "Are we being attacked?" he asked, though he knew the answer. He could feel the weight of it in the air. Before the officer could respond, the first shot was fired. A blinding beam of energy shot out from the darkness. It hit the lead Haelor ship, the Bloodborne, with the force of a star collapsing in on itself. The ship shook violently. Metal screamed as the hull bent and cracked. Alarms blared as the crew tried to contain the damage. "What was that?" Voris shouted, barely able to hear himself over the chaos. "Return fire." But his orders came too late. From the shadowy fleet, more beams of energy sliced through the space between them. The Haelor ships were caught off guard, their shields weak, their weapons slow to respond. The unknown fleet was too fast, too precise. It was like they were reading the Haelor ships' every move before they made it. The Bloodborne fired back, but its shots disappeared into the emptiness of space. The enemy ships moved with terrifying speed, like predators in the dark, always staying just out of reach. On the surface of Colony Epsilon, Commander Elena Reyes watched as the battle raged in the sky above. She had ordered her people to stay underground, to hide and survive. But she couldn't stand by any longer. She had fought too long for humanity to just give up. She made her decision. "Activate Omega Protocol," she ordered. Now, deep within the heart of the colony, a hidden facility hummed to life. Thousands of machines, dormant for years, began to wake. Large doors slowly opened, revealing massive human warships, sleek, black, and deadly. The ships were designed for one purpose: to show the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed too far. And now, they were about to show the Haelor Empire. As the warships powered up, the first message went out to the Haelor fleet. "You have made your mistake. Now you will face the consequences." The message was simple and terrifying. Back in the heart of the Haelor fleet, Admiral Voris watched in horror as more of his ships fell. One after another, they were torn apart by the invisible, unstoppable attacks. His fighters tried to engage, but they were easily destroyed, as if they were mere toys in the hands of giants. "What do we do?" his second-in-command asked, his voice cracking. Voris gritted his teeth. "We fight back. We." But before he could finish, another blast hit the Bloodborne. This time, the damage was severe. The ship began to spin uncontrollably, its thrusters sputtering and failing. The giant vessel was dying. From the edge of the fleet, a lone figure appeared. A ship, like none the Haelor had ever seen before. It was human, and it was unlike anything the Haelor had ever imagined. The ship moved through the darkness like a shadow, gliding effortlessly between the Haelor warships. Its weapons fired with precision, each shot landing exactly where it needed to, tearing through shields and hulls like paper. Vora's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. The human warship was too powerful, too quick. The Haelor were used to dominating their enemies. They were used to striking fear into the hearts of lesser species. But this was something else. One of the Haelor ships tried to retaliate, sending a massive energy blast toward the human ship. But the human vessel didn't flinch. Instead, it simply vanished, like a ghost. And then, it was behind them. The Haelor fleet was losing control. The human ship, whatever it was, moved with a speed and accuracy that the Haelor had never seen. Every time they thought they had it in their sights, it disappeared and reappeared somewhere else. The Haelor Empire, the once feared rulers of the galaxy, were now the hunted. On the ground, Alina stood at the control center, watching as the human warships took their place in the sky. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the attack began, she felt a spark of hope. "Commander, we have visual confirmation. The enemy fleet is falling back," one of her officers said. Alina's heart raced. "It's not over yet," she replied. "We've only just begun." Up in space, the unknown fleet, now clearly identified as human warships, began to tear through the Haelor forces. The Haelor Empire was being pushed back. But it wasn't just the fleet. It was the message humanity was sending. "You thought we were weak," Alina muttered. "Now you see who we really are." As the battle continued, it became clear the Haelor had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were about to learn the true meaning of regret. The Haelor fleet was in disarray. Their once pristine formation was now a scattered mess of desperate ships, trying to regroup but failing at every turn. The human warships, sleek and deadly, moved through them like shadows, slipping between Haelor ships with terrifying speed. Admiral Voris stood on the bridge of the Bloodborne, staring at the wreckage of his fleet. His eyes were wild, his mind struggling to comprehend the destruction around him. This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically, trying to regain control of the ship. But it was clear. The Bloodborne was dying. The once mighty flagship of the Haelor Empire was now a crippled hulk, surrounded by the burning remains of other Haelor ships. "Admiral," his communications officer said, his voice trembling, "we're losing contact with the outer fleets. They've all been destroyed or vanished." Voris gritted his teeth. The human ships, these ghosts, had overwhelmed them. Their weapons were too powerful, too precise, and their ability to vanish and reappear at will was beyond anything the Haelor had ever encountered. He slammed his fist onto the console. "We can't retreat. Not now. Not after everything we've built." But as he spoke, another blast hit the Bloodborne. This time, the damage was catastrophic. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and the entire ship groaned under the strain. Voris' heart sank. He knew it was over. The Haelor Empire had met its match. Down on Colony Epsilon, Commander Alina Reyes watched as the human warships cut through the Haelor fleet like a knife through butter. The battle was turning in their favor, but Alina knew it wasn't time to celebrate yet. "Keep the pressure on," she ordered, her voice steady. "We need to make sure they can't regroup." Her fingers flew across the console, activating the remaining warships on the surface. They had enough firepower to finish what they'd started. The humans had proven they were not to be underestimated. Now, it was time to send the Haelor a message they would never forget. As the human warships fired again, Alina's eyes narrowed. The Haelor were beginning to falter. Some ships were already fleeing, their once proud flags now abandoned in the face of human power. Up in space, the tide of battle was shifting rapidly. The Haelor, who had once thought they were the unstoppable force of the galaxy, were now being hunted. The human warships moved like living creatures, dodging and striking with precision. Each shot that hit a Haelor ship sent it spiraling out of control, its energy shields shattering like glass. The Haelor ships tried to retaliate, but their weapons were slow, sluggish, and ineffective against the advanced technology of the humans. "Admiral," one of Vor's officers screamed, "we're losing the fleet. We can't hold out much longer." Voris turned, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Then we make our last stand. Rally every ship. If we go down fighting." The Haelor fleet, though scattered, began to regroup in the center of the battlefield. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle. But as they closed in on each other, ready to launch a final offensive, they were met with something they had not anticipated. The human ships, once invisible and elusive, now came at them from every direction. The darkness of space seemed to warp around them, like they were everywhere at once. It was as though the humans had become one with the night. The Haelor ships fired, but their blasts missed. The human ships were too fast, too unpredictable. And then, with a single coordinated strike, the humans unleashed a torrent of energy that tore through the heart of the Haelor fleet. On the surface, Alina could see the result of their attack. The Haelor fleet was falling apart. Massive explosions lit up the sky as Haelor ships crumbled into nothingness, their once proud hulls reduced to debris. Alina felt a rush of triumph, but she knew they couldn't stop now. The Haelor had to be completely destroyed, every last one of them eradicated. Only then would humanity be safe. She turned to her crew, her face hard and resolute. "This is it, the final push. We finish this." Her hand shook slightly as she activated the final wave of human ships. These ships were larger, more powerful, and they carried the ultimate weapon. In space, the remaining Haelor ships were in full retreat. Their shields were depleted. Their weapons were down. They were defenseless. Admiral Voris watched in horror as the final wave of human warships approached. They were ready to deliver the killing blow. "No, no," Voris screamed. "We will not be defeated. We will not be the ones to fall." But it was too late. The human warships fired again, and this time it was over. The Haelor fleet disintegrated. One by one, the Haelor ships vanished, either destroyed or disabled beyond repair. The Bloodborne was the last to fall, its massive form buckling under the force of the final assault. Back on Colony Epsilon, Alina stood in front of the viewport, watching the final moments of the Haelor fleet. The sky was now filled with the wreckage of the once mighty empire. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But Alina knew this victory wasn't just about the battle. It was about sending a message to anyone who would dare challenge humanity's will to survive. As the last Haelor ship vanished into the darkness, Alina's voice rang out across the colony. "Humanity has risen, and we will never fall." The stars above burned brighter than ever before. The battlefield above Colony Epsilon had fallen silent, but the echoes of the Haelor Empire's defeat were still reverberating through the galaxy. The Haelor fleet, once an unstoppable force, had been reduced to ashes. Yet as the human warships stood victorious, a new, darker threat began to take shape. Admiral Voris, though severely wounded, had escaped the destruction of his flagship. His escape pod drifted alone through space, carrying with it the remnants of the once great Haelor Empire. But he wasn't done yet. The Haelor would rise again. They would rebuild. And when they did, humanity would pay the price. Back on Colony Epsilon, Commander Elena Reyes watched as the remains of the Haelor fleet scattered in space. Her heart was filled with a sense of triumph, but she knew better than to celebrate just yet. "This isn't over," she muttered to herself, her eyes fixed on the stars. The Haelor may have been defeated here, but there were whispers of others in the galaxy, dark forces that would soon come to challenge humanity once more. Her warships hovered in the darkness, their sleek forms reflecting the stars above. But even in the aftermath of the battle, Elena felt uneasy. She knew that victory was never as simple as it seemed. And in this universe, enemies could rise from the shadows at any moment. The room was quiet on the Excalibur, the flagship of the human fleet. Elena sat at the command center, staring at the map of the galaxy displayed in front of her. Her mind was racing, and despite the victory, her instincts told her that something bigger was coming. The Haelor Empire may have been crushed, but there was always a next threat. "Commander, there's something you need to see," her intelligence officer said, walking briskly into the room, his face pale. Elena looked up, her heart skipping a beat. She stood immediately. "What is it?" "It's a message, Commander. From someone else. Someone who knew about the Haelor." The officer handed her a datapad. Elena's eyes scanned the message quickly. As she read, her face grew grim. "The Shadari," she whispered. The message was clear and simple, but it carried a weight that no one had expected. The Shadari were a race so old and so dangerous, they were barely mentioned in any historical records. And the message they sent was an unmistakable warning. Humanity's victory will be short-lived. The galaxy does not belong to you. We will reclaim it. Elena's hands tightened into fists. The Shadari were no myth. They were real, and they were coming. Meanwhile, light years away, a different kind of battle was unfolding. On the fringes of Haelor space, Admiral Voris had made contact with the few surviving members of the Haelor leadership. They had gathered on a derelict ship, far from the beaten path, in the deepest part of space. The room was dark, illuminated only by the flickering lights of malfunctioning consoles. "We can rebuild," Voris said, his voice cold and filled with hatred. "Humanity has shown their strength, yes, but they have made a fatal mistake." The remaining Haelor leaders nodded, though their faces were tired and filled with grief. But there was a fire in their eyes, a determination to reclaim their former glory. And they would need more than just strength. "The Shadari are not just a threat to humanity," one of the leaders, a woman named Tarlis, said. "They are a threat to everyone. And if we want to stand a chance against them, we will need the humans." Voris turned sharply toward her. "The humans," he hissed. "We just fought them. You think we can trust them?" Tarlis met his gaze. "If we don't, we'll be destroyed. All of us. The Shadari are ancient, and their power is unlike anything we've ever faced. We either join forces, or we perish." Voris growled under his breath, his fists clenched. He had never been one for alliances, but even he knew the truth in Tarlis' words. The Shadari were a force that could wipe out both the Haelor and humanity in an instant. If there was any chance for survival, it would lie in an alliance. Back on Colony Epsilon, Elena continued to study the message. The Shadari's words echoed in her mind. "We will reclaim it." She felt a chill run down her spine. The Haelor had been a powerful enemy, but the Shadari were something far darker. They were not just invaders. They were predators, ancient, calculating, and cold. "What are we up against?" Elena muttered, looking at the galactic map in front of her. Her mind raced through strategies. The Haelor had attacked. Now, they were fighting to survive. But the Shadari, they were not like the Haelor. They didn't just fight for conquest. They fought for domination, and they would stop at nothing to bring the galaxy under their rule. "We need to act fast," Elena said, her voice low and determined. Contact every fleet. We have to prepare for war." The crew around her moved quickly, following orders without question. Alina knew that this time, it wasn't just a battle for survival. This time, it was a war for the future of the galaxy, and she was ready to lead humanity into it. In the depths of space, a massive ship emerged from the shadows, its engines glowing faintly. The Shadari fleet was on the move. The galaxy was on the brink of a new war. Humanity had just fought the Haelor Empire, but now a greater enemy was rising. The Shadari had made their intentions clear. They would not rest until the galaxy was theirs. And this time, humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very existence. The stars seemed to burn a little brighter, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Humanity's victory over the Haelor Empire was still fresh in the minds of all, but the looming threat of the Shadari cast a dark shadow over the galaxy. The galaxy was changing. It was no longer a place of peace. Its future was now defined by the storm that was brewing in the unknown depths of space. On Colony Epsilon, Commander Alina Reyes stood in the command center of the Excalibur, her fingers hovering over the controls. The message from the Shadari was clear. They were coming, and they were bringing a force that no one could ignore. Humanity had already fought one war, but this would be different. The Shadari were not like the Haelor. Their power was ancient, their motives mysterious, and their fleet was already on the move. "All fleets are on alert, Commander," her operations officer reported, his voice tense. "We've sent word to every corner of the galaxy. The humans are ready, but we need more." Alina's gaze remained fixed on the star map displayed in front of her. It was more than just a map. It was a projection of the entire galaxy, each sector marked with colored indicators showing the positions of human fleets, Haelor remnants, and unknown entities. But one sector, the dark zone at the edge of the galaxy, held her attention. It was where the Shadari had made their last known appearance. That was where their fleet was now moving, swiftly, silently, and with terrifying purpose. "We don't have time," Alina said, her voice cold. "The Shadari won't wait for us to prepare. We need to meet them head-on." Her decision was made. The time for hesitating was over. They had fought the Haelor and emerged victorious. But the Shadari were something else entirely. They couldn't afford to fight blindly. Humanity needed allies, but with the Haelor Empire shattered, their options were few. Meanwhile, in the hidden corners of the galaxy, Admiral Voris stood before a holographic map of his own. His escape from the wreckage of the Bloodborne had not been easy, but he had survived. And now, in the deepest parts of Haelor space, he was forming a plan, not for revenge, but for survival. Voris had never liked the idea of alliances, but he had no choice. The Shadari were too dangerous to face alone, and the humans were the only other power in the galaxy capable of resisting them. But that was not the only reason. After his defeat, there was a greater truth that had begun to form in his mind. The Haelor Empire, as it was gone. They could never return to their former glory. But if they allied with humanity, they had a chance to carve out a new future, one where they both stood against the Shadari. "We will find the humans," Voris muttered, his eyes hard with resolve. "And we will ask for their help. The galaxy will know what it means to face us, together." Back on the Excalibur, Alina sat in silence, staring at the vastness of space. The quiet of the room was broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. There was still so much to do, so many ships to organize, so many strategies to plan. Yet in her gut, Alina felt the storm approaching. The Shadari were coming, and it wasn't just their ships she feared. It was the shadow of their power that loomed over her thoughts. She knew that humanity was not ready for the full might of the Shadari. Not yet. The Haelor, as fierce as they had been, were nothing compared to what the Shadari could unleash. "Commander," one of her officers called, breaking her from her thoughts. "We've just received a transmission from Admiral Voris." Alina's eyes widened. The Haelor had lost. What could Voris possibly want now? "Patch it through," she ordered, her voice steady. A holographic projection flickered to life in front of her. Vora's face appeared, grim and serious. "Commander Reyes," he said, his voice tense, "I have come to offer an alliance. The Shadari are a threat to both of us. If we do not work together, we will all be destroyed. I will meet you on your terms, but know this: we need each other." Elena's eyes narrowed. The Haelor had been their enemies. The blood of millions of humans had been spilled because of them. But Vora's was right about one thing. The Shadari were far worse. And if they wanted to stand a chance, they needed to put aside their differences. "How can I trust you?" Elena asked, her voice low. Vora's eyes darkened. "You don't have to trust me. You just need to understand that if we fail, we all die." Elena considered his words carefully. It was hard to forget the atrocities the Haelor had committed. But in this moment, with the Shadari closing in, there was no time for pride. There was only survival. "We'll meet," Elena said finally. "But remember, if this is a trap, it will be the last mistake you make." Vora's nodded. "I'll be waiting." The transmission cut off, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. As the Excalibur prepared to depart from Colony Epsilon, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. The Shadari were coming, and they couldn't afford to fail. If the Haelor could be trusted, just this once, their combined strength might be the only hope humanity had. But as the human fleets began to gather and prepare for the meeting with Vora's, a new danger loomed, one that neither side could predict. The Shadari were not just an enemy. They were an ancient, unstoppable force. And as humanity and the Haelor came together, they would soon discover just how deep the storm had truly become. The galaxy was on the edge of chaos. The Shadari fleet was closing in, their ships silent and relentless. Their approach was like a dark shadow that swallowed everything in its path. Humanity had fought hard for survival, and the Haelor, once enemies, had become uneasy allies. But as the Excalibur and the Haelor fleet neared the rendezvous point, a new question lingered in everyone's mind. Was this alliance enough to stand against the Shadari? Commander Elena Reyes stood at the bridge of the Excalibur, her eyes focused on the star map before her. Every fleet under her command had gathered, ready to face the greatest threat humanity had ever known. The Haelor ships were close behind, their dark silhouettes cutting through the stars. "Commander," her officer said, breaking her concentration, "we're approaching the meeting coordinates. Admiral Vora's fleet is in range." Elena nodded, her expression unreadable. She had trusted Vora's, but only up to a point. This was no longer about trust. It was about survival. "Ready all systems," Elena ordered. "Prepare for any contingency. We meet with the Haelor now. But remember, if this is a trap, we fight to the last." The crew moved swiftly, taking their positions as the tension in the air grew thicker with every passing second. The moment of truth was upon them. Either this alliance would save them, or it would be the final mistake they ever made. On the edge of the rendezvous point, the Excalibur and the Haelor fleet slowed to a crawl. The darkness of space stretched out before them, silent and vast. And then, without warning, the Shadari struck. A sudden explosion lit up the void, sending shockwaves through the human and Haelor fleets. The enemy had arrived, and they were far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Dozens of Shadari warships emerged from the dark abyss of space, their sleek, terrifying forms gliding toward them with deadly precision. The ships were massive, their energy shields shimmering with an unnatural ghostly light. The Shadari didn't announce their arrival with loud attacks. They moved like shadows, quiet, swift, and deadly. "They're here," a voice shouted from the bridge. The battle had begun. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, her mind racing. The Shadari had come faster than they had anticipated, and their ships were overwhelming in size and firepower. The human and Haelor fleets were still in position, not yet fully prepared for the onslaught. "All ships, open fire," Elena commanded, her voice sharp with authority. The Excalibur and the Haelor warships unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, their weapons striking the Shadari shields with a resounding crack. But the enemy ships barely flinched, their shields absorbing the blasts with ease. The Shadari returned fire with deadly accuracy, their weapons cutting through the space around them like knives through butter. The Excalibur shuddered as a direct hit from a Shadari plasma cannon struck its hull. "Shields at 70%, Commander," her officer reported urgently. Elena gritted her teeth. The Shadari were far stronger than they had expected, their advanced technology putting the combined strength of the human and Haelor fleets at a disadvantage. But they couldn't afford to retreat. They had to hold the line. Meanwhile, Admiral Voris stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the battle unfold. The Haelor fleet had launched their own counterattacks, but the Shadari were relentless. His eyes flicked over to Elena's fleet, his mind calculating. "We need to work together," Voris muttered under his breath. "Now or never." He gave the order, and the Haelor ships aligned with the human fleet, their weapons charging together. The fire from both fleets began to coordinate in a way that the Shadari had not anticipated. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to cause the Shadari to falter. But just as the tide seemed to turn, another Shadari fleet emerged from behind the first. This was no small force. It was a full-on invasion. "There are more of them," a voice cried out from the command center. Elena's heart sank as the size of the Shadari fleet became clear. They had underestimated the scale of the threat. The Shadari were not just invaders, they were conquerors, and their fleet stretched beyond what anyone had imagined. But Elena was not one to back down. Her voice rang out over the chaos. "All ships, fall back to the secondary formation. We won't stop until they break," she shouted, determined. The fleets regrouped, pulling back and reassessing their strategy. For every Shadari ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared in the darkness. The battle raged for hours, and the human and Haelor forces fought valiantly side by side. The Shadari, though powerful, were not invincible. Their ships began to show signs of damage. The combined strength of humanity and the Haelor was starting to turn the tide, but the fight was far from over. In the midst of the chaos, Elena received a transmission from Voris. "Commander, we have no choice. If we do not use the last weapon, we will lose. It's a gamble, but it's the only way." Elena hesitated. The weapon Voris spoke of was risky, untested, and dangerous. But at that moment, she knew there was no other option. "Do it," she said, her voice steady. Voris activated the weapon, and a massive pulse of energy shot out from the Haelor fleet, striking the Shadari ships with a devastating force. The energy pulse overwhelmed the Shadari shields, and their ships began to explode one by one. The remaining Shadari ships retreated, their forces broken and scattered. The human and Haelor fleets stood victorious. Barely. The galaxy had been saved, but at a great cost. As the battle ended and the smoke of war cleared, Elena stood on the bridge of the Excalibur, staring at the remnants of the Shadari fleet. The cost had been high, but they had won. Voris's voice crackled over the comms. "We did it. Together." Elena didn't answer right away. She knew that despite their victory, this war had changed everything. The galaxy was no longer the same. New alliances had been forged, and new enemies had been made. The Shadari might have been driven back, but the future was uncertain. "Yes, together," Elena said softly. "But the war isn't over. Not yet." As the fleets began their slow journey back to the heart of the galaxy, the stars above them seemed to shine just a little bit brighter. The storm had broken, but the calm was only temporary. The galaxy had been changed forever, and the future was still unwritten.